Welcome back to The Watch, and I just watched House of Dragon episode 4. And guys, I am thrilled to actually let you know that so far the quality is very consistent. This was a good episode. Now, in terms of judging out, like just its objective quality versus subjective enjoyment, my own subjective tastes didn't enjoy this episode as much as, say, episode 3, but that's not to take away any of the competence and execution of this episode and the fact that many people might even enjoy it even more. Now, this episode could be considered a little bit slower. There wasn't really action in it, but there was far greater dramatic tension, and things that characters have do in this episode will have very significant repercussions to come. And so as a result, this episode is actually a very significant episode. And if you do like the political machinations and drama, this episode will be a standout for you. It is the most kind of explicit in terms of sexual content that the series has had so far. Yet, I'm not into all of the, nudity and stuff like that. There are two sex scenes in particular, though, weren't just thrown in for eye candy. They actually, this is a credit to the show, honestly, do say important things. There's important character development that is revealed and shown through even the intimate scenes of this episode, and so it's not thrown in there without purpose, and I can acknowledge that and give it credit to that as a result. There was needless nudity in other parts, but in terms of the actual intimate yeah, see, I'm like struggle for the tactful word. A character in this episode struggles for a tactful word of saying something at some point. I relate to him right now. I don't know, to be a bit the sex scenes. Anyway, they again, there's purpose to them. Those scenes themselves actually were done with a decent amount of of care and consideration for characters, and that's what is really making this show work. The characters, it's just very consistent. The acting is top tier, and the plot is really engaging. The King, I love him even more. He is my favorite by a long shot. I love Daemon, right? I really like Daemon. He's a really intriguing character, but the King is by far my favorite, and you get more depth with every episode with Viserys. The struggle that is going through, and in this episode in particular, he sticks his authority in people's faces a bit more, even though you can really see him struggling a bit more as well. So there is some really complex things to praise in this episode, even if I didn't enjoy it as much as other ones. There are moments that I loved. There are some really distinct moments. Yeah, absolutely loved them. And with what this episode sets up makes it very, very significant. Now, one of the things that I feel this episode did, and remember, this is just my kind of general review before I go into spoilers, this episode does really, really well. And look, the series, the show so far does really well, but this episode in particular does really well, is not spelling things out for the audience, letting the audience speculate, because the show won't tell you why characters do certain things, yet when you think about it, you can see that's really in line. And there are reactions, or you can tell what a character is thinking, how they reacted, purely based on acting and body language and the delivery. Brilliantly done. Really, really well done. This is, this is how you would hope good storytelling to be done. And we've seen so little of it in modern media. Now, I don't know if it'll still go off the rails. This has been my warning with my reviews of House of the Dragon from the very beginning. But I am loving the fact that so far each episode has been consistently good. I can definitely say that. And as I mentioned, there are multiple moments where you could write pages to describe what is going through a character's head in what is just conveyed through body language and the expression and acting, and because you get the context as well. Great. Pivotal decisions are made, pivotal mistakes are made in this episode, which, if you're intrigued with the politics, it'll draw you in. I would give this episode a 7 out of 10, a good solid 7 out of 10. Very well done episode. Is it the best thing in the world? For me, no, but also I think there are other works that draw you in even more than this. This is very good, but I would say the characterizations, the politics, the intrigue and everything of Game of Thrones Season 1 is still better than House of the Dragon so far, but it's not to say House of the Dragon isn't bad, okay? Game of Thrones Season 1 did amazing with the story, the characters, and all of that, and so it's a very high bar to meet, but this show is not doing a disservice and is by far orders of magnitude better than the later seasons of Game of Thrones. So, look, I'm really able to enjoy this show at the moment because, one, I didn't get hugely invested in Game of Thrones, and I went into my full watch through of Game of Thrones knowing where it was going, and also a lot of things are spoiled already. I had done reviews on later episodes and things, and I purposely stopped because I knew what happened in the stories, and I'd even seen some of the later episodes. I stopped like at season 5 around there, and it's easier for me to look at House of the Dragons as a self-contained show, divorced of Game of Thrones, because there is the concern, like, whatever happens in this show, well, it still leads to the end of Game of Thrones. I personally would be very happy if this show was great, House of the Dragons was great, and if it led to a good quality remake of Game of Thrones with a much better and well-executed ending. I'd be perfectly fine with that. If it's a good show, bring on more, okay? And at the moment, right now, with the episodes released, these episodes, they're solid. I hope it continues, but if not, I will call it out. I went into this episode trying to be critical as I am on anything, including how critical I am with Rings of Power, and it's hard to find horrible things. I couldn't find anything that was like breaking for plot, characterization. There might be one or two things I can comment on as we go through chronologically, but nothing that breaks the episode, not by a long shot. No huge flaws. Like, it's very consistent, very well done on that front. So give the show props where it deserves. So there we go, though. That's my non-spoiler portion of the review. We'll go into the actual, spoilers, going chronologically, things that I noticed, things that I liked, and if there's any criticisms I might be able to make, I'll bring those up as well. The show starts with something that it's just refreshing to see, and it's showing a scene and letting the audience realize what's going on just by the context of the interaction of the characters. I can compare this to Rings of Power. If something like this was done, it would be spelled out, where there might be two characters in the background saying, "Oh, the princess, look at all these suitors that have been set up by her father. Which one do you think? I don't know," but and telling us what's happening, where we don't need that. And it just feels more immersive by seeing the scene play out between the characters. And look, it works really well. Subtle things like the body language of the princess here tells us all what we need to know about how she feels about these suitors, the situation, and it's just good to see, finally. This young guy, right, he comes in and is even younger than Princess. I want to show a little expression that she has. So, watching the princess here, she's listening to this young guy propose why, this would be a good alliance, and just the slightest turning of the lip and mouth there tells us everything we need to know with what she actually thinks about this proposal. We don't need a character observing this. We don't need her to spell it out or anything. All we need is that. And it's great. It's great. Now, that's mostly, the summary of this scene, but this young guy is getting heckled by a noble off to the side and is struggling through it. And they come to blows. He pulls out a sword, right? And I just like this. I don't know. The young guy getting you it. He runs the other guy through. You see it in the background here, where they go to fight. He's struggling. She looks back, and the young guy gutted him. I don't know. It's like, it was well set up. It was good to see him. And this character, the young guy, might actually be a significant character a bit later on in the series. Now, some questions are like, how could anyone stand for this? This almost looked like an accepted duel where someone challenged someone's honor. The young guy decided to defend his honor, and everyone watching kind of like, all right, they'll duel, and they're expecting someone to die as a result. And so when it's that guy, look, I think it fits in the universe that not many people are making a big kerfuffle about it, especially if this guy is a lesser noble, which I was discussing this episode with Gary from Neurotic over on his channel, and with Mauler, and it turns out that he might have been a less significant noble. The concern might have been he could have been a Baratheon, and that could have caused a big, you know, like problem between that young guy's house and the noble. But anyway, look, so maybe there was it's little action, but still satisfying. One of the things I like in this scene is they give easy context to what's going on, and it isn't forced. The princess basically is having a conversation with, you know, her loyal guardsman knight, and saying that her father's going to be displeased, and he's like, well, displeased about what? Is it going to be about this or that? And the two things he mentions gives us context about what's happening, you know, that she did something wrong. And the second context was like, you know, she has stopped. She was supposed to go on this tour, essentially, to see all these tutors, and she stopped it like several months before the conclusion, not hearing all of them. And it gives us context of what she was supposed to be doing, and the time that has passed, but it came through natural dialogue, not forced dialogue, where he is stating something that she knows, but he is questioning, do you think he's going to be worried about this or that, which justifies him stating something that the characters know, because it's framed in a question. That's how you do it effectively. We saw it done very poorly. Look, I need to compare it to Rings of Power, because these both shows are coming out at the same time, and the difference in quality is stark. And to show you why this works is by showing it where it doesn't. And in Rings of Power, Durin, he says, Sigyn Tarag, the challenge of Sigyn Tarag, the dwarven test of endurance, and he is explaining to everyone in the scene who would already know it. And it's like, why are you telling everyone something they already know, Durin? We know it's for the audience, but there are natural ways to give the audience information by framing it right to justify the character saying it. This scene in House of the Dragon does it very effectively. While they're on the boat, a dragon flies, and it's Daemon's dragon, and it causes, you know, the princess to knock her head, but introduces that, yes, Daemon's back, and everyone is very, very interested in what's going to happen, because Daemon has been disobeying the king for the last 4 years, really, and this is the first time they're seeing Daemon's coming back from this, you know, big victory he's had. And look, I love it. One of the things that I love is that Daemon, he just struts. As he's walking in, just the way he's walking is just, he's a strutting peacock. He's come back from this battle. And when you can see that a character is in character just by the way that they walk, their body language, or you can recognize a character just through their body language, brilliant, you know? It's a credit to the actor, Matt Smith, but it also shows that these characters are fleshed out, you know, complex characters. And one of the things that I love here is the line that they have Matt Smith play here. Okay, he goes forward and he has the weapon of one of, I think it's even the crab guy's weapon in his hand. He's holding it here. And it looks like, you know, maybe he's going to be challenging the king or something, and they don't want him to get too close. But he lifts the weapon, as you see here, and then he throws it at the king and says, basically, add it to the throne. That's actually kind of like an offering, where you offer a weapon of your defeated enemy to the king, saying that you defeat this enemy for the king, but it's not completely subservient, because the way that he says it and gives it, add it to the throne, shows Daemon's cockiness. And so he has, he's being kind of submissive to the king while doing it in a really cocky way, which just is brilliantly in line for Daemon's character. And it's actually a delicate balance, where he doesn't go too far in one way or too far another. And then he bends the knee, and basically is saying, I did this, I conquered it in the name of the king. And, you know, they essentially make up, but it comes off sincere at this point. You don't really know what Daemon's plan is, but the reactions of the characters are very in line with this, where Viserys, the king, you can see Otto there, he's spying, he's not really happy about this, them, you know, making up again, because you know how Otto feels about Daemon. And so Daemon even gives the crown that he was wearing to the king as, again, a sign of submission. And then they embrace, okay? And you can really tell that Viserys the king, he's happy about this. He really wants to bury the hatchet, as it were, with his brother. But they also show some sincerity in Daemon here. Like, Daemon looks to be truly relieved to be reconciled with his brother here as well. And it shows the complexity in Daemon's character. He's not just a cookie-cutter villain. He's not completely like, he thinks his, brother is weak and perhaps not even a good king. But there is still affection there, even from Daemon, even with what he does. Complex character work, great to see. This is another one of those brilliant scenes where heaps of information is conveyed through subtext and through how the characters respond, where the princess basically tries to approach and join the conversation. And by the way, the king here, he's trying to reconcile with Daemon by saying, your mother always loved you first, you're the great warrior, and all these things. So you can really see this is genuine from the king's half. And the actor, I think it's Reese Effens? No, that's a different actor. That's the guy who plays Otto. It's Patty someone plays Viserys, and he does just such a brilliant job. But the difficulty, or the ice that exists between the princess and the king, because she didn't do what he said, she didn't finish off the thing. Look, see that look? Just that brief little look here is enough to convey everything we need about how he feels about what's going on. Daemon clearly notices it by that glance. Even these small little emotional interactions says volumes. And look at what the Queen does here. She can feel how awkward it is. It's brilliant. This is just really engaging for me, where you can see the subtext of what's actually happening because you understand the characters. You get I guess, fed the context by the interactions about who's feeling certain things about what. The king is clearly annoyed at the princess, but he didn't have to say, I am so upset with you, why have you bothered? Doesn't need to be spelled out. Love it. Now, there's an interesting interaction where the queen sits down with the princess to try and, make things a little better. The princess expresses her frustrations, right, about she doesn't want to be trapped to give birth for the rest of her life and doesn't want to be married. And I like that they don't let her get away with some of these comments, because if they had, a political axe to grind where they really wanted to push a certain message about the mistreatment of women in this universe, there wouldn't be comments like this. The Queen literally says back to her that some people are lucky to even have 2 suitors, yet you have a score of them. And so she's basically saying, look, you're actually very privileged and pampered, and there are a lot of people worse off than you, and so stop complaining, your life isn't as bad. And look, I'm really glad that they try and show multiple perspectives. I'm not saying it's the best situation in the world for the princess to not have complete freedom and everything, but the reality is this is a world where it's crap for a lot of people, and they show multiple sides of this. Out of any episode, I will say, though, this episode is the one that could be interpreted to have the strongest kind of political or ideological messaging behind the rights of women and other things. But the thing is, though, there's pushback against this. The princess, she goes on a bit of a rant about, if she was a man, she would be able to do as she wishes and all these things. And then the king says, you can't because you're a woman. Yet there's enough context in the show to explain pretty clearly why that's the case. And the show has shown men suffer certain things that women don't need to suffer nearly as much in the show, like all those guys that were killing themselves in the joust just to get some attention and favour and potential, options in their lives because they didn't have a lot of influence or wealth. And so there are multiple sides shown in this show, and if they are trying to push a certain ideological message, they're not doing a good job of it, because the show is far more balanced as a result, like this scene right here, where there's pushback against the princess, who is basically was trying to say, woe is me, my horrible lot as a woman, essentially, and the Queen's like, not nearly as bad as a lot of other people. I'm glad that it has that complexity and nuance in it. I will say, though, right, the Queen is supposed to have had 2 children, at least, at this point. She was pregnant in the last episode, and she has bounced back from that like she never had them. Okay, they haven't really tried to show her age in this episode. because yeah, they probably could have done something to show her age a bit more. Again, 2 children. She's recovered from that remarkably well, to the point where she'd stand as an example of childbirth sometimes is not nearly as bad as the princess is fearing. So, interaction between Damon and the princess. This is pretty pivotal because it's Damon's words here that sets the princess down a path of pretty much self-destruction. And the show frames that as basically self-destruction. She's saying that, you know, she doesn't want to get married because she won't have any freedom. And he says, well, no, you can still do what you want. I do what I want. I'm married and who cares? It's disingenuously framed because there are differences between men and women, and she wouldn't be able to get away with it nearly as easily as he does, which she literally finds out in this episode. And so it seems like the show is also demonstrating this, that things aren't equal, because this is the reality. If a guy sleeps around, because he's a guy, men don't fall pregnant, unfortunately they can move on. And that's like you know, men who don't support, you know, any children that they father is despicable, okay? I'm not excusing this, but this is a reality, and especially will exist in this world, that they can escape consequences of that far easier than women would be able to. And so if she, as a princess, sleeps around, that can cause some really big serious problems. If pregnancy falls out and she's not married, and it will damage alliances that their kingdom might need for stability. Any number of so much stability and safety for the realm is resting on her actions, and she's not taking it nearly seriously as she should, which is almost framing an argument that she might not be the best, you know, ruler to go with going forward, because she does a number of things that you can actually use as objective arguments that she's not going to be the best ruler. She's already shown that she's pretty lousy in diplomacy, the way she interacts with other nobles and everything, so she's causing division between powerful houses where you need strength and unity. And then, in this very scene, it kind of ends with her saying one of her only desires is to live in solitude, which would be awful for a monarch to do. And so there's already a pretty solid argument that she is not fit for the throne. And there are, yes, like realities that, you know, I think can be fairly addressed with the fact that she is a woman, and they've shown how dangerous childbirth is. It's not as dangerous as the show depicts, like 50, it's not like that. But if they are trying to set up that having children is dangerous to the point where it's very common for women to die. In the actual medieval period, 1 in 10 seems to be the general figure, which is still, you know, horrible. The show is trying to say it's even worse by the look of it. And if there is such a high chance that, you know, the ruling monarch will die when they have a child, it means that's a very vulnerable, insecure thing to have to be a ruler of the realm, and you need heirs, and she doesn't even want to have children. She's kind of been pretty open about that as well. That's also really bad for the ruling monarch. Anyway, so there's all those reasons just for her as a character. Add on top of the natural realities that biology impose upon, you know, the different genders, that's also like the advantage of going into war and having someone who is far more capable in warfare lead the charge and stuff like that. All those things still exist. And if there's preference to giving men, you know, the crown over, you know, having the inheritance passed to a woman, all those things come into play as well. So the show is, if you just look at what the show is implying and depicting, it's actually not showing like such when I say sexist, there is of course sexism in this one and everything, but you can understand the context in which it exists in by what the show is depicting, and it doesn't say what certain showrunners and people try and co-opt this show to say it's saying a certain political message. It's not saying that at all. And this scene is just another one of those examples, and it sets up some, as I mentioned, problematic things. Damon's clearly not a good influence, but Damon, this could be very well in his plan. And another credit to the show, and it's that the show doesn't spell out exactly why characters do certain things, allowing speculation and discussion. I had a great discussion, as I mentioned, with Gary and Waller, to the point where sometimes, yeah, I could see their perspective, and it shift what I originally was assuming, and then likewise in reverse, because it is open to interpretation, and there's multiple ways you can interpret it, but a lot of them are valid, which just creates intrigue. It pulls you in. You're interested in it because it's not sometimes so clear as day, this is why they did that. You're left to be able to figure it out yourself, and there's enough clues for you to be able to figure out in the show. That is very well done. So after this conversation, there's another important thing that comes out. Okay, so one, they're in a council session, and the princess is part of the council. She's actually has a seat on the council now, whereas before she didn't, conveying a passage of time. And they're talking about the Valerian house. It's the house that was fighting the crabs and everything, that they're potentially making an ally with the Free Kingdoms, which could give them a crazy amount of power, maybe even more power than the crown. That's a problem. And the way that they can try and solve this issue is who the princess marries. Her marriage can form an alliance to solve this issue, give them the power they need to try and oppose any potential threats to them. And what I really like about this, right, is the politics are so, like it's so logical, laid out, and this show, nearly more so than any other show, depicts and shows the importance of marriage in politics in a medieval setting more than nearly any other show I've seen. You can really see how important these political marriages are for the stability and strength of certain houses and the kingdom. And so this isn't like being imposed upon this princess because it's unjust and there's no true benefit. No, there were a lot of benefits to political marriages. And what is established in this scene so strongly is that now her marriage is even more important to try and solve this issue with this, really powerful house that might potentially ally with people external to the kingdom and be a massive threat. We get to see a couple of indications that the Queen is having difficulties. It's not all sunshine and daisies, but they balance it with scenes where they show genuine affection from her to the king, and so it's not, again, a one-sided, her life is horrible, her freedom's been taken away, and everything's being imposed upon her by the men of this world, where, no, she's actually doing this of her own choice as well, because I think through context, she sees benefit in it as, on top of that, like, her children might be heirs to the kingdom. In the last episode, her father, Otto, the hand of the king, says, don't you want your children on the throne? And she says, what mother wouldn't? Meaning that she wants the best for her children. And by having married the king, her children are born into great wealth, privilege, and potentially could be the rulers of a kingdom, which she even said she technically wants that as well. So more depth given to this character. Princess, all right? She is given a map that there's a secret door in a room that leads outside. She follows it, and when I'm looking for possible criticisms, it's hard to find really anything because the show's very well made, but here's one possibly. See this hand railing? That looks like a kind of cast iron hand railing that why would they be so cautious to have hand railing? And it seems maybe a bit outside of the, if they have cast, I haven't seen a lot of cast iron, essentially. Anyway, so maybe the hand railing is out of place for a medieval setting. I'm scraping bottom of the barrel here to find criticisms. Okay, so she meets with Damon. Damon takes her to see the city, and there's an interesting scene. Well, it cuts away, sorry, and we see the king getting tended for, and this is one of those moments where the queen is shown, she's actually depicted having affection for the king, where she sends him out and she tends his wounds with a much gentler hand than the others. And so, multiple sides to her character, it isn't just woe is me. So Damon has taken the princess to see a play, and one of the takeaways from the play is that they don't want the princess. There's like, do you want the princess to be the queen? They're like, no, and everything. And one of the possible explanations as to why he's doing that is to make her feel more vulnerable and that she has no allies, and Damon is the only ally, and it could have been a maneuver of it on his behalf to be able to manipulate her a bit more so she would be, I guess, less repulsive. She didn't show much repulsion at all. Damon takes her to a brothel and then plays the moves on her, and she doesn't give really any objection at all, to the point where she is more interested in it than him. And this could have been one of the purposes of showing this scene right here, to make her feel a bit more needy, vulnerable, feeling rejected, and then she's more easily turning herself into Damon's arms. Again, it's not said in the show. This is speculation that is fun to discuss, because you look at the clues and then you try and see what could it possibly mean. It's great. Like, it's a credit, and it's fun to do as well. It's good to see it in a show. So yeah, Damon takes her to a brothel. Of course, I'm not going to show the scenes. And what's interesting about it, he starts to be reluctant, and she starts to try and encourage him, and then he stops it and leaves. This, it's not explained why, and there are multiple different interpretations you could have to try and explain this. Which one is right? Several work, and it's just, again, as the very last thing I was saying, it's great that the show has this, and I was just discussing it with Mauler and Gary about, what do you think? Why did he do that? A show that can do that is a show that is working well. It knows what it wants to make clear, and then it also knows what it wants the audience to discuss. I can give my own interpretations. Like, it seems like maybe Damon, like, his affection for the king felt like maybe this is a betrayal. He couldn't go through with it. It really does look like he is attracted to, and this is his niece, by the way. He does like her, but perhaps he didn't want to get it this way. He tries to propose that to the, Viserys a bit later, to marry her. Not the best way to propose it, but here's an interesting interpretation. It does seem like Damon wants the throne. He was disinherited, it's going to his niece now, and if he marries her, well, he kind of gets the throne in a different way. If he proposes it to his brother, there's probably zero chance his brother would ever accept it. But if he could have her spoiled or sullied, where she's not a good prospect for anyone else, that might enable a situation in which there's no other choice but to allow him to marry, and this could be just Damon's plan, doesn't really work out. But it's just a possible interpretation of what he's trying to do here. But then he couldn't go through with it because if he does really like her, he would rather have this intimate interaction, let's say, in marriage, not in some seedy brothel. I could be wrong, but it's a valid way of looking at it, and there are other valid ways of looking at it as well. Isn't that great? Isn't that cool that we can do that, where there's enough complexity to discuss those things? But what happens as a result after that, Princess seems to be a bit unsatisfied. She returns to her room and she starts to basically seduce, I forget, is it Sir Cole? Her bodyguard. They've already set up that they like each other, and so they end up having a relationship. What did Otto say it? A coupling. And this is not a good decision on her behalf at all, but again, it's all justified. Damon telling her that she should be able to have her own fun and everything, or essentially you can have your fun and still get married, and she thinking that she can without any proper consequences and stuff. See, this is her teasing him, basically. Yeah, and he's a little reluctant, but then he likes her, so they end up coupling, as Otto put it. It also kind of cuts to another coupling moment between the king and the queen, and it shows that she is not into it. The king has asked her to his bedchambers, and she says it's very late, but she's the queen. She doesn't feel like she can say no. The thing is, though, it's an interesting scene because he seems to notice her reluctance as well, as like he understands what's going on. There's subtext and there's actual character work in that coupling scene, which doesn't make it just a throwaway. And honestly, like, a lot of these scenes are more uncomfortable than titillating. And I think that's actually credit to the show, because some of these scenes probably should be uncomfortable. I like that they're not going out of their way to try and overly sexualize it. In that case, at least, not in all cases. The thing is, though, the princess was seen leaving the brothel before she returned to have some fun times with, is it Sir Cole? And someone is seen, and the message gets back to Otto. He's a bit of a spy master, but again, it might not have been, because this little guy seems to work for another spy master that we see in the next scene. It's interesting that she was more easily noticed because Damon specifically removed the hat that she was wearing that covered her hair, making her far more identifiable, which seems to indicate that Damon wanted her to be seen in that situation, which gives a bit more credence to the theory that he wants the princess's reputation soiled a bit to give him higher chances of marrying her, get her perhaps return to him, because if everyone's against her and he shows himself that he's willing to be her ally. Again, machinations, ploys, and there's evidence for our speculations. But there's a great moment, Otto, here, and it might not be this scene specifically, but it's a moment of decision where Otto needs to decide what he'll do. Damon wakes up, and this is the spy master. That little kid essentially worked for her. And there's enough clues for us to figure out what's going on. She's no longer a whore, and she is practicing a new profession. And we get given enough context to realise that she is playing some of the espionage side of things. Because I think there's the young boy that returns, and so she was the one that sent him. Damon seems to be in a bit of a stupor, almost like he regrets what he tried to do last night. He's completely hungover. He's feeling awful. We'll see the fallout there. So this is the This is just a great kind of, again, subtext acting. We get given a volume of information about what the character's feeling just through this moment right here. See the expression here, where he's reluctant, he's conflicted, he doesn't know if he should. Look at this, look at that, right? Like, he's in a really difficult place, because Otto is aware that a good hand of the king should let the king know what he's learned about what the princess has just done, because if it comes out and the king isn't aware, it could ruin her reputation, it could ruin any possible marriages going forward, and so the king needs to know so he can try and fix any possible issues. But coming from Otto, it could also look very self-serving, and that's exactly what the king's reaction is. The king feels like he's lying about the princess just so his own grandchild, which would be the heir to the throne, because remember, the king is also, like, his son is Otto's grandchild. And so the king reacts very negatively, accuses Otto, but then, when Otto leaves, you can tell that even though the king says he doesn't believe him, he's conflicted about it, and that he's giving more weight to the accusation than he originally said. We don't need to be told that, we get to see it. The queen confronts the princess about this, and a lot is revealed about the princess, to what extent she's willing to lie to protect her own skin. Does she have any other choice? Yeah, potentially. She could have told the queen the truth and they worked together to try and repair the issue, but she would not even admit the truth to her former friend. She's still kind of a friend, to the point of even swearing upon her mother's grave that this didn't happen, and that's like a full-blown lie. And it's just really interesting to, and not only that, she even goes so far to try and play the victim, that it's a malicious lie that people would do against her. And look, it rings true, because we do see people who've done bad things that then later try and play the victim. And I'm glad that the show didn't shy away from the reality that some people do go to such lengths to protect their own reputation. That's what. And look, this is the thing is, though, by admitting it to the queen, she's not admitting it to the world. The queen could still legitimately try and help her out if she was honest here, but she chose not to and lie to an extreme extent, to a very extreme extent. Says interesting things about her character, and doesn't really paint her in a positive light either. You see, she's even floundering at some points, especially when first confronted, and you don't know if the queen really believes her or not. But this is some really good conflict that they're setting up, you know, and there'll be repercussions from that later. We're about to get a really great scene in the episode as well. Damon returns to the Red Keep and basically just gets manhandled and arrested straight away and dragged in front of the king. And this is such a great scene for both Damon and Viserys, the king, because he is very upset, and he comes off really strong, but also like, you can tell the king hates what's going on, and he has that level of conflict there as well. But at one point he gives Damon a big solid boot. Damon just doesn't care. He is basically like, so he doesn't even deny it. Now, they didn't go all the way. Damon stopped before you could say they finished the act. He still went way over the line, but he doesn't even deny it. He says, so what? You're the king, do what you want. Let me marry her. of course, Viserys won't have it, but Daemon's character just comes through so consistently, because this is in line with his character. He doesn't care. And the king as well, the king basically says, you're going back to, you know, where your wife is, and don't come back. But he also now needs to try and solve things with his daughter. Good little scene between him and the queen here. They're talking about how the princess denied it, but Daemon didn't. But the queen says, well, Daemon could be lying just to increase your own hurt, and very well seems to be what Daemon has done. But we do find out a bit later that the king, he believes that if anything, whatever happened, she's not innocent, and that she is no longer a maiden. Let's just put it that way. There's a conversation here, and it's really about, you know, responsibility. And this is where she tries to say, if I was a man, I could father nearly as many bastards and no one would care. And the reality is, sorry, men and women have a difference in biology, and she would not be able to get away with it. It's a big problem. She tries to say that, or tries to not deflect, but get Otto, make it seem like Otto was doing this for his own end. Viserys snaps and says that you have to marry now, no matter what. But she convinces the king that he needs to do something about Otto, which leads to one of the final scenes in the episode. A strong scene for Viserys here, where he basically... well, not basically, he fires Otto, but accuses Otto of potentially murdering his father. Otto, like, as cunning and conniving as he's tried to be, he seems to be at the end of his wit. He doesn't really know how to get out of this, so he just has to accept it. Look, it's an excellently acted scene. You can see his kind of worry, fear, and stuff. You see the strength in Viserys. Look, just look at like how there's a defensive posture in Otto right now. He's on the back foot. He doesn't really know how to get out of this. So these are great scenes. These are great character interaction moments that, like, there's very little to criticize in the episode technically, but it has elements that, you know, make me uncomfortable, I don't like. So I'm not criticizing the show for that. This is just my subjective take on it. And there's not as much action that I really do enjoy. And so as a result, I didn't enjoy this episode as much. But technically, it's very competently done. So, and you know, it's a very important episode for what they set up into the future. And so House of the Dragon continues to be very, very good. This is the last scene. Her reaction, I felt, was a little out of character here, but discussing with Gary and Morla, they felt it was more like worry that she's been found out, and I can see that. It just seemed like that they were trying to portray her as being reluctant to what's being offered here. She's being offered a type of drink that will prevent any pregnancy from happening. And with everything that she's said in the show up to this point, she doesn't want children. I feel like her reaction would be relief. Oh, good. Thanks for that. But it's almost like they're trying to show her reluctant. Actually, this could be far more clever. The King Viserys might not know if the Queen was still a maiden, and this could be the very mechanism he has used to find out the truth. And I'm using the show's terminology here, maiden, to mean virgin. The princess has made it very clear that she does not want to have children. She is afraid of childbirth. So because she is indeed not a maiden, she would be quite compelled to take the drink to prevent any pregnancy, which she clearly doesn't want, but that would also be proof that she is indeed not a maiden, because why would she need to drink it if she still was? And so this hesitation on her face could be the fact that it has really caught her out, and if so, this is brilliantly done. And that could be why she's got this expression and countenance there. Perhaps it's valid. Again, it's not said explicitly, and I like that about the show. There we go. This has been House of the Dragons, episode 4. Very competent. So far, the quality of the show is remaining consistent. There will be a concern about when they switch the actors over to see if they can maintain the quality and how well that transition goes. Again, wait and see. So far, it's good. And if you'd certainly take the show in isolation, separated from the Game of Thrones TV show, and you're able to do that, I think a lot of people would be able to enjoy it. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I look forward to reading them. And, you know, there's more to see. There's more. We'll find out if the quality remains consistent. because that's what we do here. Stay on watch.